welcome back to Freezer Tech. This video is a continuation of our Python series. Today we'll be going over another data structure in Python, or you can think of it like a collection known as tuples. Okay, so let's get started. So first we are going to know the basics of tuple. What is a tuple? So let's get a definition of what is a tuple. These tuples are collections in Python that are ordered and unchangeable. You can think of this statement like Python tuples are data structures whereby the order in which you input the data will be the order in which you output the data when you fetch it out. That is what it means by ordered. Unchangeable means that once you create a tuple, you can't change it, you can't modify it. Okay, you can delete element, you can't append elements to a tuple once you create it. So this is why tuples, this concept in programming is known as immutability. So tuples are immutable. So the takeaway from this section is that tuples are ordered data collections, they are unchangeable or immutable. So let's move on. How to create a tuple in Python. So to create a tuple, we simply give it an identifier, the assignment operator, and then circle, braces, and then we input the data that we want. You can put in any data type within tuples. We can keep in lists, integers, and so on. So let's move on to the coding section so that we can implement what we have discussed over here. So let's get started. So I have opened my Visual Studio Code. I have a file called tuples.py. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to discuss is how to create a tuple. We have already seen the syntax. So to create a tuple, I'll give it this, my tuple, the assignment operator, and then the circle braces. So in here we can put in any data type we want. So let's put in the data type of, let's put in programming languages that are there. Okay, so the first one will be Java, and then we'll say Python, and then we can say C++, and so on and so forth. You can also put in here other data types like numbers. Okay, you can also put in here lists. So you can put in here any data structure that you want to put. You can also put in here dictionaries. I know that we have not discussed our dictionaries yet, but you can put in any other data structure inside of a tuple. Okay, so this time we'll just be working with the strings. So let's work with the strings. So now that we have created a tuple, let's see how we can add elements to tuples. So to add elements to tuples, you have just done that by doing this. Okay, so that is how you add elements to tuples. So let's move on. How to access elements from a tuple. So once you create a tuple, the main purpose is that you store data in there that you want to fetch out later. So that is accessing the data. So how do we access the data in tuples? We can access data in tuples using indexes, because tuples are ordered, meaning that they have indexes. If you don't know what an index is, we have discussed this in our previous tutorial, so you can check it out. What an index is, we talk about lists, so we discussed index over there. So what index is that basically computers start counting from 0 and then 1, and then 2. So how the index of Java in our tuple is 0, the index of Python is 1, the index of C++ is 2. So that's how computers start counting. So these are known as indexes. So indexes are uniquely used to identify elements within a tuple or any other data structure. So let's move on. So to access elements from a tuple, we use things known as indexes. So we have just discussed what an index is. So there are three main ways that we can use indexes in tuples. So we can use positive indexing, negative indexing, or range indexing. So for example, let me just print out this to demonstrate positive indexing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to print out Python. So what is the index of Python? So the index of Python in this list is 1, right? Because it's 0 and then 1 according to our indexing. So to use the index, we use the the bracket notations, the square bracket notation. So in here we just put the index of the element that we want to print out. So the index of Python in this tuple is 1. So if you run this on our screen, we will get Python, and here we get Python. So if I put in 0, we will get Java. So if I run this, we get Java. Okay, so that's how we work with positive indexing with tuples. Now let's move on to negative indexing. Earlier on in our Python series, we have discussed what the negative index is basically we start counting from the back side of our data structure or our collection rather than the front side. So we start counting from here going backwards. So to do this, we use negative in front of that index that we want to access. So if I print -1, let's run this and we see what we get. We got C++ because -1 is the very last element. So if you put -2, we'll get Python and so forth. That is basic negative indexing. Now let's use range indexing. Range indexing, let's assume that we add more elements to our tuple. So let's say we add here C#, another language, C#, we add C itself. Okay, so now let's imagine that we want to print from Python until C#. You don't want C or Java. Okay, so to do this we can use range indexing. It means that we print within a certain range. So we want to start printing from 1 because the index of Python is 1, and we want to end at the index of this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3, and then so we put colon and then 3. But if you run this, we will not get C# because the last element within our range will be excluded. So if you want C#, so let me just run this so that you can see what I mean. So if I run this, you see we do not get C#. Okay, so to get C#, we include 4 because the last element within the range will be excluded. So if you run this right now, we will get C# included. Okay, so that's how you work with range, accessing elements from a tuple using positive indexing, negative indexing, or range indexing. Okay, so now let's move on to the other section. This section will be discussing how to change tuples, the values of tuples. We have discussed that I told that tuples are immutable, meaning that once you create them, you can't change them. Okay, so now to change a tuple, we need to use a very clever way. First of all, what we need to do is that we need to change that tuple into a Python list. Since lists are mutable, mean that we can change the element of a list. We'll change the element of that specific list, and then we change that list back into a tuple so we can get the original tuple. I know it's a bit confusing, but let's see the implementation. List tuple, let's call it list tuple, will be equals to, so to change something to a list, we use the list constructor. So we pass in here any data structure that we want to change into a list. So now this will change for us this tuple into a list. So now if I print the type of a list tuple, if I print the type of list tuple, we should get type of a list. So we get is of type list. So it means we have successfully changed this tuple into a list. So if I print out that specific list, we should get a list structure. So you see we get a list structure containing the same elements from the tuple. Okay, so now we have successfully changed our tuple into a list. So now let's add different elements to this list. So we have studied lists earlier on in our series. So if you didn't watch that tutorial, just check it out. So to add something to a list, we use the append method, right? We are familiar with that. So to add something, let's add another language. Let's add Dart. So that is another programming language. So we're adding that into our list. Now that we got that, let's print out the list to see if that is in our list. So we can see we have that inside of our list. Now let's change our list back into a tuple. So we say my tuple will be equals to, we pass in the tuple constructor, and then we pass in the list item. Okay, so now we are changing tuple. Okay, so we are changing this back into a tuple. So let's run this. We can see we have okay, we are still printing our list. So now let's, instead of printing the list, let's print my tuple. So if I run this, we can see we have tuple with that included. So to confirm this, we just check the type of of that data structure, the type of the identifier variable. So if you run this, we can see it is of type tuple. So this is how you change elements of a tuple. You have a tuple, you want to add a new element to it. First you change it into a list. Since lists are mutable, you add elements into that list and you change that list back into a tuple. Okay, that is the way to get around the immutability of a tuple. So let's move on to our other section in this tutorial. So in this section we'll be going over how to loop through a tuple. So now we have created our tuple. Let's remove all of this, we don't need that. So for that, in I called it my tuple. So we want to print that data out. Okay, so now we have done that. So for data in tuple, we want to print out that tuple. So we use a for loop to basically loop through a tuple. Okay, great. So another way, if you're coming from languages like C++, you're not usually used to this. You're used to the old for loops. So we can use indexing to actually get that. So we can say in range, this is range, so we can pass in the length of this tuple. So we can pass in the length of that tuple, so the length, and we specify our tuple, my tuple, and then we'll print my tuple. We use the bracket, square bracket notation, and then here we put in our index. We have looked up this earlier in this series, in this tutorial. So let's print and see what we get. We get the same amount of elements. Okay, so that's how you work with, you can loop through tuples in Python. Okay, so let's move on to the other part, checking if an element exists in a loop and a tuple. So let's print out, we say no, let's do this. We say if, so we want to check if Java exists in our tuple. If Java in, we use the in operator, which we have discussed earlier on in this series. If you didn't watch that tutorial, you can go and check it out. We discuss about arithmetic operators and different operators. So the in operator basically checks if our Java, what you're looking for, Java is in tuples. Okay, so it's just like English, if Java in tuple. Okay, so if Java in tuple, we'll print yes. Okay, so if Java is in our tuple, we'll print yes. So let's run this, we will get yes. Okay, so now let's write a language that isn't in our tuple. So let's write here JavaScript. So if you run this, we should get no output because JavaScript is not in our tuple. So this is how you can check element tuples. Now you see this is a multi-element tuple, means that it has many elements. Now if you are new to Python, you think that by writing this, you think that you have created a tuple. But if you print out the data type of my tuple, it will return to us a string. This is weird, right? It has returned to us str, which is string in Python. This is weird, but why? But this is a tuple structure, not a string, right? So to create a single element tuple in Python, you basically include a comma after the first element. Okay, just like this structure. So you include this comma. So this comma is very important. So now if you run, the type of data structure that we have is going to return to us of type tuple. So this is one very important thing you need to take care of if you're creating single element tuple. I know it's weird, but yeah, that's what you can do. So now let's return back to our larger tuple. Okay, let's remove this, we don't need it. So how do you remove elements in a tuple? Is it possible that we can remove elements in a tuple? Okay, let's do that. Let's say remove my tuple, and then we want to remove element as index 0. Do you think this will work? We get an error. This error is expected. Do you know why? I have told you that tuples are immutable, meaning that you can't change them once you create them. You can't delete elements from them. You can't add elements to them. Once you create them, that's it. You can't modify them. This is called immutability. So tuples are immutable. So this was just a trick to catch you. So you can't actually delete specific elements in a tuple, but you can delete the whole tuple in large. So I am going to delete this tuple. So now let's try to print my tuple, and then let's see what we get. Okay, my tuple is undefined because that tuple doesn't exist anymore. But if we move this up here and then try to run it again, we see we get my tuple. But once I have deleted, it doesn't exist again, so Python throws at us an error. That's why we're getting this error. So delete basically removes that tuple. Okay, so you can delete specific elements of a tuple because a tuple is immutable, but you can delete a whole tuple at large. Okay, so that is one way of working with tuples. Okay, now let's move on to another part. Let's say we have two tuples, so we got my underscore tuple 2. This is a tuple. It contains some other programming languages. Let's say it has dot, another programming language, Perl, and so on. So now let's say that we want to combine these two string tuples. We want to add them together into one large tuple. To do that, we can just say here final underscore tuple will be equals to my tuple plus my tuple 2. So now if we print final tuple, if we run this, we see we get okay, run this, we get the combination of the both tuple, because you can see here that is from the second tutorial tuple, and also as well as power, both of them are from the second tuple. Okay, so that is how we can add tuples in Python. So let's go over some few methods that we use with tuples. So let's go over them. Let's remove this, we don't need it. So the first method that you're going to go over is the count method. So let's say my tuple. This count method is used to count the number of occurrences of an element within our tuple. So let's say we have here another Java. Okay, so we have two Javas. So now let's count how many times Java has occurred in our tuple. So let's run this. What do you think the output should be 2, right? Because there are two tuples in our thing. I mean there are two Java words within our strings within our tuple. So now let's get Python. Python. So now let's run this code. You see we get only 1 because Python occurs only once within our tuple. So this is how we work with the count method within tuples. Let's move on to another method, which is the index method. So the index, it returns to you the index of a certain object within your list. So let's say Python, we want to get the index of Python. Okay, let's run this. We get 1 because it's 0 and 1, so it returns you the index. Now we have two Javas in our Java strings within our tuple. So if I run this code, what do you think we'll get? We got 0 because this index returns to you the first occurrence of that data or that object within the tuple. So if I remove Java out and then I run this code again, we will get now 4 because it's 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it returns to us the first occurrence, which is Java, like that. So it returns to you the first occurrence of the specific element that you're looking for. So now let's move on to another method. This is actually a function, the length function. The length function will just return to you the length of our tuple. So if we run this, our length is 5. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements within our tuples, that returns to you the length. So let's move on to constructors, tuple constructors. So tuple constructors, let's imagine that you have a list. Let's call it my underscore list will be equals to a list that has some elements inside of it. So now let's say that let's print out the type of my underscore list. So if we print out the type of my underscore list, the type will be of type list, right? Because it's actually a list. Okay, now let's use let's call it this my underscore tuple, which will be equals to, so we use a tuple constructor to change this list into a tuple. So a tuple constructor can be used to create other tuples or can change other data structures into a tuple. Okay, so if I run this code right now, if I put in here my list, it's going to change my list into a tuple data structure. So now let's print the type of my we'll print type of my underscore tuple. So if you print the type of my underscore tuple, its type should be tuple because the tuple constructor takes in. Okay, so this first one, before we changed it here, it was type of list, but after we changed it, we can see now it is type of tuple. So the tuple constructor can take in other data structures and convert them into tuples. Okay, so you can also use their dictionaries to also work, but instead of using the colons, we use an equal sign. So this is how we work with tuples in Python. So before we end this tutorial, I want to give you, there are many other methods that we didn't go over with tuples. So one pro tip in Python to find methods about or to find information about a certain object in Python or certain thing that you don't understand in Python is very simple. You just type help and then you run this code. So if you run this code, it's going to bring for you this. Let me just expand this. It's going to bring for you this screen over here. So you want to find more information about tuples. So it's saying tuple. So if I run this, it's going to give me a lot of information about tuples. This is a class of object. These are the different methods that we went that can be used with tuple. You can see the count and the index method and all these other methods that we didn't go over. So this is how you can access information about certain things that you weren't sure of. Okay, so yeah, this is tuples in Python. Thanks for watching this tutorial with me. In the next tutorial, we'll be going over dictionaries in Python. So please like, share, support, and subscribe to my channel. In case you have any question, you can ask in the comment section below. I'll do my best to get back to you, or you can follow me at FreezoTech on Instagram. So thanks for watching.